Good evening, Sunday, and a couple quick things. First thing I want to ask is if anybody is willing to share essay 2. Send me a video of you reading the essay or an audio file, and I will work that into a video on Tuesday or maybe even tomorrow. Or you can send me an email and ask me to read it, and I will do that. It's a way for us to keep things normal. I think that it is still a good practice for us to do, and then I will maybe put up a discussion board so that we can give one another feedback on that student essay. So if you could do that yet tonight, if I can get a couple students from both first hour and third hour to do that, then we'll move forward. Like I said, I'll work that into the video with the audio file or video file or me reading the student essay. So let's do that. A couple students have already submitted essay 2, so those will keep coming in throughout the day. I had hoped that a number of you would still be done, but maybe you're just perfecting those. Most every student turned in task 2. Those are done. I'll work on grading those soon and get the grades in the book. And what else? Virginia Woolf. You're reading Virginia Woolf this week. I have another Virginia Woolf essay I'm going to throw up into the end of this video. I'll have a woman who is going to read it so you can listen to the audio of it. I'll give you a link to the text as well. If you don't want to listen to it, if you don't want to read it, it's not a required piece. It's very short, but I think it will give you another taste of what her writing is like. So do consider at least checking it out. If you're not interested, though, like I said, you can just skip it. And that is it. We're off to another week 2, in our homes, doing our thing. Remember to check in with your mentors. Reach out to us if you have questions. And let's have a great week. All right. Talk to you tomorrow.
The Death of the Moth by Virginia Woolf. Moths that fly by day are not properly to be called moths. They do not excite that pleasant sense of dark autumn nights and ivy blossom, which the commonest yellow underwing asleep in the shadow of the curtain never fails to rouse in us. They are hybrid creatures, neither gay like butterflies nor sombre like their own species. Nevertheless, the present specimen, with his narrow hay-coloured wings, fringed with a tassel of the same colour, seemed to be content with life. It was a pleasant morning, mid-September, mild, benignant, yet with a keener breath than that of the summer months. The plough was already scouring the field opposite the window, and where the share had been, the earth was pressed flat and gleamed with moisture. Such vigour came rolling in from the fields in the down beyond that it was difficult to keep the eyes strictly turned upon the book. The rooks, too, were keeping one of their annual festivities, soaring round the tree-tops until it looked as if a vast net with thousands of black knots in it had been cast up into the air, which, after a few moments, sank slowly down upon the trees until every twig seemed to have a knot at the end of it. Then, suddenly, the net would be thrown into the air again in a wider circle this time, with the utmost clamour and vociferation, as though to be thrown into the air and settle slowly down upon the tree-tops were a tremendously exciting experience. The same energy which inspired the rooks, the ploughmen, the horses, and even, it seemed, the lean bare-backed downs, sent the moth fluttering from side to side of his square of the window pane. One could not help watching him. One was, indeed, conscious of a queer feeling of pity for him. The possibilities of pleasure seemed that morning so enormous and so various that to have only a moth's part in life, and a day moth's at that, appeared hard fate, and his zest in enjoying his meagre opportunities to the full, pathetic. He flew vigorously to one corner of his compartment, and, after waiting there a second, flew across to the other. What remained for him but to fly to a third corner, and then to a fourth? That was all he could do, in spite of the size of the downs, the width of the sky, the far-off smoke of houses, and the romantic voice, now and then, of a steamer out at sea. What he could do, he did. Watching him, it seemed as if a fibre, very thin but pure, of the enormous energy of the world had been thrust into his frail and diminutive body. As often as he crossed the pane, I could fancy that a thread of vital light became visible. He was little or nothing but life. Yet, because he was so small, and so simple a form of the energy that was rolling in at the open window and driving its way through so many narrow and intricate corridors in my own brain, and in those of the other human beings, there was something marvelous as well as pathetic about him. It was as if someone had taken a tiny bead of pure life, and decking it as lightly as possible with down and feathers, had set it dancing and zigzagging to show us the true nature of life. Thus displayed, one could not get over the strangeness of it. One is apt to forget all about life, seeing it humped and bossed and garnished and cumbered so that it has to move with the greatest circumspection and dignity. Again, the thought of all that life might have been had he been born in any other shape caused one to view his simple activities with a kind of pity. After a time, tired by his dancing apparently, he settled on the window ledge in the sun, and, the queer spectacle being at an end, I forgot about him. Then, looking up, my eye was caught by him. He was trying to resume his dancing, but seemed either so stiff or so awkward that he could only flutter to the bottom of the window pane, and when he tried to fly across it, he failed. Being intent on other matters, I watched these futile attempts for a while without thinking, unconsciously waiting for him to resume his flight. As one waits for a machine that had stopped momentarily to start again without considering the reason of its failure. After perhaps the 7th attempt, he slipped from the wooden ledge and fell, fluttering his wings onto his back on the windowsill. The helplessness of his attitude roused me. It flashed upon me that he was in difficulties. He could no longer raise himself. His legs struggled vainly. But as I stretched out a pencil, meaning to help him to right himself, it came over me that the failure and awkwardness were the approach of death. I laid the pencil down again. The legs agitated themselves once more. I looked as if for the enemy against which he struggled. I looked out of doors. What had happened there? Presumably it was midday, and work in the fields had stopped. Stillness and quiet had replaced the previous animation. The birds had taken themselves off to feed in the brooks. The horses stood still. Yet the power was there all the same, massed outside, indifferent, impersonal, not attending to anything in particular. Somehow it was opposed to the little hay-coloured moth. It was useless to try to do anything. One could only watch the extraordinary efforts made by those tiny legs against an oncoming doom which could, had it chosen, have submerged an entire city. Not merely a city, but masses of human beings. Nothing, I knew, had any chance against death. Nevertheless, after a pause of exhaustion, the legs fluttered again. It was superb, this last protest, and so frantic that he succeeded at last in righting himself. One's sympathies, of course, were all on the side of life. Also, when there was nobody to care or to know, this gigantic effort on the part of an insignificant little moth against a power of such magnitude to retain what no one else valued or desired to keep moved one strangely. Again, somehow, one saw life, a pure bead. I lifted the pencil again, useless though I knew it to be. But even as I did so, the unmistakable tokens of death showed themselves. The body relaxed and instantly grew stiff. The struggle was over. The insignificant little creature now knew death. As I looked at the dead moth, this minute wayside triumph of so great a force over so mean an antagonist filled me with wonder. Just as life had been strange a few minutes before, so death was now as strange. The moth, having righted himself, now lay most decently and uncomplainingly composed. "Oh yes," he seemed to say, "death is stronger than I am."